This is the lecture for Ancient and Medieval History, or lesson, for Monday, the 4th of October, 2021. We are on number 12, the creation myth for Japan. Now, a few things about Japan before we go into this myth and the next one. First off, like Britain, Japan is basically an archipelago of islands off the coast of mainland Asia. The original inhabitants of Japan were called the Ainu. They still exist. They are tribal people that live on the northern island of Hokkaido, and they are Caucasians. They're not Orientals. Number two, the current Japanese people invade Japan a few hundred years before Christ under the mythical god emperor Jimmu Tenno, lineal descendant of Amaterasu Mikami, goddess of the sun. They establish a rice-growing society on the Yamato plain of Honshu, main island of Japan, and that is the first iteration of Japanese civilization. The native religion of Japan is Shinto. And what Shinto is a belief that everything is alive, has a soul, and can be communicated with. Now, this isn't just like the tree huggers in our past. There's a difference. Japanese Shinto also includes objects made by people. So if you watch enough anime or read enough manga, you will see that the machines themselves develop a personality. That's Shinto. In my favorite anime, Space Battleship Yamato, the Battleship Yamato, which is based on a real warship from World War II, does have its own sort of character and personality. It doesn't come out in terms of talky talk, but it's there. Yeah.
It also kind of reminds me of, I know this is kind of far-fetched, but like Star Wars, how the droids have a personality.
Yes, no, that's exactly right.
Speaking of anime,
and Cruz.
Sorry.
Yes, Cruz.
Speaking of anime and Star Wars, and yeah, I guess it's technically not an anime, but 2003 there was an animated Clone Wars series.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
I like the computer-generated one better.
I do too, but I think it's like they showed different characters.
Well, the stylized art was interesting too. It was very Indian, Asian Indian.
Yeah.
So what we have is a people that believe that their leader that their land is alive. In fact, the land of the rising sun is the land of the awake and aware gods. Why? Because they have volcanoes, earthquakes, tidal waves, typhoons, and dozens of other types of very, very difficult climate and weather problems. The Japanese people become a community that is more communitarian than any communist's utopian dream. As a nation, Japanese children learn very young to work together. And their leader is a god. The current emperor, Naruhito, is a lineal descendant of the goddess of the sun. It is the longest reigning monarchical dynasty in human history, the Japanese dynasty. They believe that their emperor is a god. Now, after World War II, when Japan was occupied by the American military, because they were stupid enough to launch a war against us, the god emperor had to renounce his godhood. And so part of the official law of Japan says that the emperor is not a god. See, Hirohito said so himself. But to this day, many, I would say most Japanese, do revere the emperor as a semi-divine or a divine being. And what this means is that Japan has an amazing ability, pretty much unique in world history. The entire nation can be moving along in one direction with a lot of momentum, and then suddenly something will happen that might threaten the god emperor. And the entire nation turns on a dime 90 degrees, and now is going in this direction just as fast, turns again 90 degrees. This happens again and again in modern history. The Japanese people and nation are incredibly deft at changing course, changing the nature of their country, all of that in service of protecting the god emperor. So what we have here is two excerpts from the Kojiki. The first one is just labeled Shinto, and I need a single person to come up and read it, and we will talk about it. Birthday boy.
Oh, thank you.
You'll need one of these.
Oh, I will.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And remember, you guys in the audience, you're taking notes of anything that's interesting. Go ahead.
I, Yoshimaru, say, now, when chaos had begun to condense, when force and form were not yet manifest, and there was now names not done, who could know its shape? Nevertheless, heaven and earth first parted, and the three deities performed the commencement of creation. The passive and active essences then developed, and the two spirits became the ancestors of all things. Therefore, did he enter obscurity and emerge into light, and the sun and moon were revealed by the washing of the eyes. He floated on and plunged into sea water, and heavenly and earthly deities appeared through the ablutions of his person. So, in the dimness of the great commencement, we, by relying on the original teaching, learn the time of the conception of the earth and of the birth of the islands. In the remoteness of the original beginning, we, by trusting the former sages, receive the era of the genesis of deities and of the establishment of men.
Thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
I like your pose also. It's good. What I want you to get from this is less the details of creation and more how we know about it. The Japanese acknowledge the truth that we never talked to anyone who was there at creation. So how do we know about any of this stuff? Well, in the third paragraph, there are two phrases that say it. First, top line of the third paragraph, about halfway across. We, by relying on the original teaching, and then down a little bit, we, by trusting the former sages. In other words, tradition.
Oh, Fiddler on the Roof.
Exactly. The traditions of Japan are as big a deal as anything else. The Japanese, what they get is they get their meaning, they get their truth by trusting tradition. Japan traditionally is a very conservative society, like Rome. Yeah, they've got commies, they've got revolutionaries, but most Japanese still are very deeply conservative. They do not like the idea of change, and they deeply trust tradition to give them the meaning of their lives. Now, do you have any questions before we move to the next one? The next one is so dirty, so pornographic, that I had to edit it, because the Japanese also have no common sense of sexual morality with us. Our sexual morality and the morality of the Middle East are all shaped by monotheism. The Japanese consider sex to be a perfectly natural thing, to the point where you can watch softcore porn on regular television after like 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night. It is not considered to be dirty or weird. They don't want little children seeing it, obviously, but to them it's normal. On the other hand, they censor a lot of the violence that we see in movies. So they're much more open about sex and much less open about showing violence for entertainment. There are reasons for this. Number 13 is from the Kojiki, K-O-J-I-K-I, K-O-J-I-K-I, from the Kojiki. And it's said right there. The Kojiki is the Shinto scripture that explains the creation of the world. Now, in Shinto, everything is alive, as I said. Everything from skyscrapers to battleships to waterfalls to rivers to mountains to volcanoes. You can talk to everything. Everything has a kami, K-A-M-I. Not kami as in kami jerk, but communist. But kami as in divine spirit. So these divine spirits all inhabit the world. They're all around Japanese, and they can be talked to, and they have things to say. In this myth, it's one of the few myths that has creation come through the same way that we're created, by sex. There's a male, there's a female, they make love, and they give birth to all sorts of things. And, well, there are problems between men and women, and these problems also come out in this story. Because I don't want any of you to feel oogie as you read this, I will read it for you. So, listen as we go. In the beginning, there was nothing but a vast oily sea of chaos that contained a mix of all the elements. That's a lot like the Chinese myth. cosmic soup. There were three spirits, or kami, in heaven who looked out over the sea and decided that a world ought to be created. The spirits produced many gods and goddesses, including Itsunagi, the male who invites, and Itsunami, the female who invites. Itsunagi, the male, was entrusted with a magic jeweled spear for his work. Itsunagi and Itsunami, the male and the female, descended from heaven, and Itsunagi stirred the spear around in the sea. When he pulled it out of the chaos, some drops congealed on the tip of the spear. Then the drops fell back into the sea where they formed an island. Itsunagi, the male, then asked Itsunami, the female, what her body was like. She replied that it was very beautiful, and then they go into excruciating detail about the female anatomy. I censored that. Itsunagi found that interesting. And then he goes into his male anatomy in really ridiculously excruciating detail. I censored that. They decided to join, and then they described the joining in vivid detail. I censored that. They decided to join together, and when they did, Itsunami began to conceive many wonderful things, that is, give birth to many wonderful things. The first thing they conceived was a disappointment, the leech. They placed it in a reed basket and cast it adrift. To this day, the leech still likes to live among the reeds. Then, Itsunami gave birth to an island. Just drop it on my desk. The foam island, which was useless. But with a little practice, the couple produced the islands of Japan. Waterfalls, mountains, and other natural wonders. Then Itsunami gave birth to the fire spirit, which burned her body very badly, causing her to become seriously ill. While she was ill, her vomit became the metal mountain, prince, and princess, the source of all minds. Her feces became the clay, and her urine the freshwater spirit. But Itsunami was dying. Itsunagi wept bitter tears as she descended into the land of night. He begged her not to stay there, but she replied that she could not leave as she had eaten some of the food there. Here's a hint. Again and again throughout mythology from around the world, if you go to the land of the dead, do not eat the food, because once you do, you're stuck there. So she ate the food. Itsunagi then went into the land of night to fetch his wife. But when he arrived, he was horrified. She had begun to decay. When Itsunagi finally took a good look at her, he was so horrified that he began to run away. Itsunami sent the ugly night spirit to retrieve him. Itsunagi, the male, continued to run in terror and disgust, leaving the horrible land of night behind him. As he was running away, he cast down the comb from the right side of his hair, and that comb miraculously became grapevines. Then he cast down the comb from the left side of his hair, and it became bamboo shoots. When the ugly night spirit stopped to eat the grapes and bamboo shoots, Itsunagi was able to escape towards the upper world. Itsunami, the female, was now more determined than ever to get her husband back. She originally didn't want him to come here, but now that he's here, he should stay. Misery loves company. She now sent 8 thunder spirits and all the warriors of the land of night after him. But Itsunagi outran them all. Out of breath, he stopped to rest beneath a peach tree on the border between the land of night and the upper world. When the forces sent by Itsunami approached, Itsunagi threw peaches at them. To his amazement, they ran in terror. To this day, it is known that peaches drive away evil spirits. Remember that. Peaches. Itsunami was now furious. She called to her husband, "If you continue to flee, I will strangle 1,000 of the people of Earth every day." Itsunagi replied that if she did that, he would cause 1,000 new people to be born every day. Thus, death entered the world. Itsunagi was tired after his flight from the terrible land, and refreshed himself by bathing in a stream. He needed to wash away the defilements of the terrible land of the dead, and as he did, Gods and goddesses were produced. As he washed his left eye, Amaterasu Omikami, the sun goddess, appeared, and the ancestress of the emperor was born. As he washed his right eye, it became Tsukiyomi no Mikoto, the moon. When he washed his nose, Susanoo O, the storm god, was born. So, there are a variety of creative processes at work here, but the primary creative process is sexual generation, which makes sense. Wouldn't human beings who are produced in that fashion consider the possibility that the earth was produced, or much within the earth was produced in that way? Any questions, comments, or thoughts on the Kojiki myth? I'm not going to describe it in class.
I want to know more.
Well, look it up. Look up the original Kojiki. Get a translation.
I want to know
Anson has
too.
been
But I-
eliminated from using Chromebooks for the
My
rest of
tiny brain is contaminated.
My sense is that you will, if you get one through a school website, it will be censored also. Just because. Okay, number 14. Polynesia. Need somebody to come up and read. Who wishes to come up and read? Anson.
Yeah.
Francis,
The Polynesian one?
Yeah, number 14.
Polynesian. Huh?
You can go when ready.
All right. Number 14, the Polynesian origin story. According to the traditions of our race, Rangi and Papa, or heaven and earth, were the source of which, in the beginning, all things originated. Darkness then rested upon the heaven and upon the earth, and they still clove together, for they had not yet been rent apart. And the children they had begotten were thinking amongst themselves that might be the difference between darkness and light. They knew that beings had multiplied and increased, and yet light had never broken upon them, but it continued dark.
Thank you.
That's it?
Yeah.
Whoa!
Short, to the point. Now, the Polynesians have a myth that deals with a conundrum. Rangi is the sky. She's solid. The sky is not this air thing that we think it is. It's a solid object. The earth, Papa, is under her. Solid. They are both solid. Rangi and Papa are together. There's probably a little space between them, like a really shallow but wide cavern. And the first people are there. Now, that's not that unusual, the idea of the sky and the earth being together, and then the sky and the earth pull away from one another. What's unusual is this. They had known nothing but darkness, and yet they wondered about light. Think about that. That would be like a person who had never seen, I don't know, a giraffe, to wonder, what would it be like if we combined a camel and a snake? Because that's what a giraffe kind of is. It's this camel body with this really snaky head, and it eats trees. It eats leaves off of trees. That's why it's tall. It's like the Brachiosaurus of its time. Why would a person who's never seen a giraffe wonder about one? They've never seen about a giraffe. They've never heard about a giraffe. Giraffes are completely unknown to them, and yet they're wondering about them? What this has to do with is something about the Polynesian people. You see how big the Pacific is? Look over there on the maps. You see between South America and North America, go left, and then go to the other side of the map, and all the way to the Asian mainland. You've got the Great Pacific Ocean, biggest ocean on Earth by far. Those Polynesians were one of three groups that colonized the islands of the Pacific. There were the Micronesians, the Melanesians, and the farthest ranging were the Polynesians. These guys got into canoes no longer than this room is from me to the clock. Now, these canoes were dugout outriggers. They took a tree, they hollowed it out, or they would make it by hollowing out wood until you had a really nice hoe form. But then they had these struts to a log, and that log would help keep the canoe from flipping in the ocean. Canoes tend to flip. Now, that's not a bad canoe. But they would then go out in the Pacific, where nobody else had gone before, looking. They'd navigate by the stars, and they'd go out for days or weeks, and then they wouldn't find anything, and they'd turn around and they'd have to make their way back. Do you understand how hard that is? It would be easier for human beings if we figured out how to move faster than we now understand we can, to get to Proxima Centauri, Alpha Centauri, Groombridge, Sirius, or Wolf 359, or any of the other close-in stars to our solar system. Because we at least can see them. We know where they are. When you're at sea, there's no landmarks, because you're at sea. And the islands and all the lands are beneath the horizon. You see a very small part of the ocean that you're traveling through. Do you get how gutsy those people must have been? How much courage they must have had to get into a craft like that and go out into the ocean that has the biggest storms on Earth, just looking on the off chance they'll find something. And I'll tell you, it works. They go out and they find the Central Pacific Islands. They find Tahiti. They then leave Tahiti and find Hawaii. The odds against men, maybe a few women too, going on those voyages, finding something, and then coming back and navigating their way back, the odds are so far against it, you'd have a better chance of getting hit by lightning twice or winning the lottery. But they do it. They colonize the Pacific Islands. So to me, people who've never experienced light, wondering about what the light is like people on an island wondering if there's land in that direction and caring enough about it to build a boat and then go out and see. And if they find land, or if they don't, they've got to make their way back. Next. So what I want you to remember about this one is they wondered about the light, something they've never seen. They wondered about the light, something they've never seen. Okay. Myth 15, Tahiti, which is a variant of Polynesian, but it's a little different. I'm going to call on somebody, unless somebody who has... Yes, please.
Find a way to push out of here, that is.
Thank you.
Wait, how do you pronounce it? Taora?
Taora.
Taora. Taora was his name. He stood in the void. No earth, no sky, no men. Taora calls the four corners of the universe. Nothing replies. Alone existing, he changes himself into the universe. Taora is the light. He is the seed. He is the base. He is the incorruptible. The universe is only the shell of Taora. It is he who puts it in motion. He brings forth its harmony.
Thank you. Wow. Taora,
Taora.
or I guess properly Taoa, my bad, is one of many Polynesian gods. But the main message here is pretty straightforward. We, in our scientific arrogance, assume that the world is just matter, and therefore that it doesn't matter. We assume that rocks and trees and birds and bees have no consciousness, have no personality, have no meaning. And we treat it just like stuff. The Polynesians believed that everything, like the Shinto believers in Japan, that everything was alive and everything had a soul and everything had a personality. The shark that ate you. It wasn't evil exactly, it was doing what it did, which is weed out the weak. The world, according to this myth, is not just stuff. It's alive. Creation, rocks, trees, islands, waves, storms, are all life forms. And the way you interact with them is fundamentally different if you believe something is a life form than if you believe it's just an amalgam of matter. It's just a bunch of stuff. So, myth 15, the world is alive and has a personality. Now, these next two myths are somewhat complicated. Need two people who haven't done anything yet today to come up and read the Pueblo myth, this American Southwestern United States Southwestern Indians, and then the Zuni, who are their neighbors. I will call then upon Miss Bird and on you in the corner. Both of you, please come up. Okay. You're going to read the first paragraph and up here, the third, and then you'll just keep going down every other paragraph. You're going to read the second paragraph and the fourth, and you're just going to keep going down every other paragraph. They'll be switching back and forth. Okay?
Long ago, when the earth was soft, all the relations with the spirits were more intimate. Everything could talk, animals, plants, even wood or stone.
The Kachina came in person to dance. The Kachina came in person to dance, or as the Akoma to fight. The coyote was a well-behaved messenger between the underworld and the White House.
The war brothers, begotten by sun or water, not only produced order by finding the directions or making mountains and valleys, but led the migrant people or hard-rank societies or free people, or from monsters the woman had born in the lower world after the world of men.
Okay, a little louder, please.
Sun became a handsome man to appear on earth to his sons. It was a golden age. Water gushed from rocks. Boy made corn grow from the people of Morbai in a single day, giving the seeds to the corn plant.
The seeds the Christian mothers obtained from their skin were planted at sunrise, ripened at noon, and were dry at sunset. It was only after the trouble with Bashani that corn had to be planted as it is planted today. In those days, all growth was miraculously rapid. The war brothers, as well as other children, begot by the gods, grew up overnight, or rather in 4 days.
Switch.
Even human persons were wonderful. For example, the two girls who played hide and seek with
Nebawaki
and perched invisible on his hair plumes were able to do this because the world was still new. When the world was raw, people used to be like this. They were very wonderful in those days, the old people tell us.
Thank you both. Okay. There's a scene in The Matrix, where the original movie, where the main character Neo meets Morpheus, this wise man. And Morpheus asks Neo a question. Actually, he makes a statement. You've always known that there's something wrong with the world. If you know somebody who's old and whose health is beginning to fail, and I can tell you because I'm older than I used to be and my health isn't what it used to be, there is a sense of betrayal that many people who are in that situation have. Because the body that they used to count on was no longer working the way it should. In fact, ultimately, a person's own body becomes their worst enemy before they die of natural causes. You cannot keep the human body alive very long. So, is this how things were meant to be? Well, in the Bible, there are stories of Noah living 1,000 years. The early generations of man, Adam and Eve and their descendants before Noah, all seem to have much longer lifespans than we do today. The idea that as time goes on and as the world has become more sinful, our lives became shorter, to the point where before industrial times, the average lifespan was about 25 years old. That means half the people die before they're 25. So, if we were supposed to live longer lives, and we're killed by the degenerative disease of old age somewhere in our 60s, 70s, or 80s, there is a sense of what's gone wrong. This isn't natural. Because maybe we had been designed for a much longer lifespan. That sense of a perfect past that has since deteriorated is very much in this myth. This is a paradise, a utopia, a golden age, when even Coyote, who's like the Loki, the mischief maker of the American Indian mythos, the Coyote was a simple messenger. Little girls could play in the hair of a god and be cute. You could plant something in the morning, it would ripen by noon, and you could eat it that afternoon. You could plant corn effortlessly, it would grow. It was a delightful time. Now, what does that have to do with if you ever have a sense that the world doesn't work the way it should? If you ever have a sense that things are needlessly complicated and needlessly oriented towards suffering, maybe it's because there was a better time. And because of our sin or because something went wrong with the world, whatever. For whatever reason, it's not like that anymore. And we can't count on things being nice like this. We've got to work hard to grow corn in the desert. Any questions, comments, or thoughts before we move to the Zuni, or the natives, the neighbors of the Pueblo? The Pueblo and the Zuni are among the most advanced American tribes. The only people more advanced in North or South America were the Aztecs of Mexico and the Incas of Peru. There had been the Mayans too. The Pueblo and the Zuni didn't build cities, but they did have towns and farms. Do I see volunteers to read from the Zuni, or should I call? I guess I will call. Sir, in the corner, Mr. Omas, and Sir, on the other side of Mr. Saw. Both of you gentlemen come up, please. Bring your myths. Okay. You're going to start with the first, and go to the third, the fifth, and it goes on to the next page.
Stop here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And you are going to start right here, and you're going to do every other paragraph with him, and it goes on to the next. Okay? You may begin.
Then did the Sun Father take counsel within himself, and casting his glance downward his fields on the great waters, a foam cap near to the earth mother.
With his beam he impregnated, and with his heat he incubated from foam cap, whereupon she gave birth to Winam Aki
Biaka.
Piaka and the beloved twins, who descended first Uanim Anaki, the beloved preceder, then Unaki Yaluna, the beloved follower.
Twin brothers of light, yet older and younger, the right and the left, like to answer and deciding and doing.
To them the Sun Father imparted, while still retaining control in thought, and his own knowledge and wisdom, even as to the offspring of wise parents, their knowingness is imparted, and as to his right hand and his left hand, a skillful man gives craft freely, surrendering not his knowledge.
He gave them of himself and their mother the foam cap, and great cloud bow, and for those arrows the thunderbolts of the four quarters, twain and to either, and for buckler the fog-making shield, which spun out of the floating clouds, and spray unwoven, as of the cotton we spin and weave, supports as on wind, yet hides, shadow hides its bearer, bending also.
And of men and all creatures he gave them the fathership and dominion. Also as a man gives over the control of his work to the management of his hand.
Well instructed of the Sun Father, they lifted the Sky Father with their great cloud bow into the vault of the high zenith, that the earth might be warm and thus fitter for their children, men and creatures.
Then along the trail of the sun seeking
Pashiankia.
They sped backwards swiftly on their floating fog shield westward to the mountain of generation.
With their magic knives of thunderbolt, they spread open the uncleft depths of the mountain, and still on their cloud shield, even as a spider in her web descended, so descended they unerringly into the dark of the underworld.
There they abode with men and the creatures attending them coming to know them, and becoming known of them as masters and fathers, thus seeking the ways for leading them forth.
Thank you both. And good job with the difficult to pronounce words. You can see some relation between the two. For example, the twins, the first and the second, are referred to in the earlier myth, the Pueblo myth, as the war brothers. Secondly, human beings appear first in the caves. And there are monsters in the caves with us. Sometimes monsters made by the women when they made love to the demons, when they were angry with the human men. And the twin brothers break open the mountain and begin teaching the human beings and getting them ready to come out into the light. So a lot of these desert people, imagine how bright the sun is in Arizona and New Mexico. A lot of these desert people imagine that they are born in the caverns of darkness. There's something womb-like about that also, without going too much into that. There's also this, and this has something to do with the way that these Indians think. A lot is made of the fact that the father gives to the sons knowledge and skills without giving them up. Now, if I have gold, and you have need of gold, and I choose to give you that gold, I have given you the gold, and I no longer have it. If, on the other hand, I have knowledge and wisdom that you might need, and I give you that knowledge and wisdom, I still have it. You have it too. I've copy-pasted it rather than cut-pasted it. Again and again, this myth talks about using knowledge, the mind giving over the work to the hands, but still holding on to it. So I think for some reason, that quality of memory that allows me to keep knowledge and share it at the same time is something that the Zuni found fascinating. And there's finally this, parents and sons. Parents and children, fathers and sons. The son-father teaches the boys his wisdom until they're ready to take things over on the earth. And what do? The very cloud bow that he made for them, they put their father in it, and they draw it back and shoot their father into the sky to become the sun in the sky. You've got parents or a parent. Right now, they're the adult, you are the teenager. Time may come, if you both live long enough, that you will be the adult, maybe with children of your own, but your parents have reached their second childhood. And in that second childhood, they'll need to be taken care of as you once did. That is a different phase. In order for a person to become fully adult, they need to step away from their parents. That's why it's so disturbing when people live at home through their 20s into their 30s. They never step away from their parents. So this story talks about that. Talks about the twins shooting their dad into the sky because they were ready to take over. And the dad agreed. He said it's time. So what I wanted you to get from the Pueblo myth, the myth 16, is that there was a paradise time before things got bad. What I wanted you to get from 17 was the War Brothers, their finding the people and becoming their teacher, the idea of keeping knowledge yet giving it, and the way that they dealt with their father shooting him into the sky. So 4 things from that. Okay, the Inca myth. I'd like 2 people to come up. Each of these paragraphs is rather dense. Do I see any volunteers? Okay, Miss Jaylee, and you. I'll read the first paragraph because it's just annotation. It's just it's italicized notes. Miss Jaylee, why don't you read the second paragraph, the middle one, and you, please remind me. Olivia, you can read the third one. It's Dallin, right? Okay. So, the Inca Empire covered the Andean region, including Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia. The language of the empire, Quechua, is still spoken extensively in Peru and Bolivia. And that's all I need. So go ahead.
Okay. In the most ancient of times, the earth was covered in darkness. Then out of a lake called how do you pronounce that?
Kolosuyu.
Kolosoyu, the god Kontikli
Viracha.
Viracha emerged, bringing some human beings with him. Then Kontiki created the sun,
Inti.
the moon, created the sun, the moon, and stars to light the world. It is from Inti that the Inca emperor of
Takwana Susuyu.
Takwana Sisuyi is descended. Out of our great rocks, Kontiki fashioned more human beings, including women who were already pregnant. Then he sent these people off into every corner of the world, kept a male and a female with him at Cusco, the navel of the world.
Another story is that Khan the Creator was in the form of a man without bones. He filled the earth with good things to supply the needs of the first humans. The people, however, forgot Khan's goodness to them, so he punished them by stopping the rainfall. The miserable people were forced to work hard, drawing what little water they could find from stinking, dying riverbeds. Then a new god,
Pakahakarache.
came and drove Khan out, changing his people into monkeys. Then took earth and made the ancestors.
Come on, give it a try.
That first sentence.
Pakahakamache.
Akahakamache.
Okay.
Good.
There you go.
You got it. Good. Then
Then took earth and made the ancestors of human.
good. Thank you both. Difficult words here. Pakahakamache. If you ever want to have your kid hate you, name your kid Pakahakamache.
Okay.
Akahakamache.
Noted.
And here's my brother Joe.
My brother Joe. My name is Akahakamache.
That tells you the parents were out there.
They were.
Okay, middle paragraph. The sun comes from Kontiki Viracocha. The sun, the Inti, gives birth to the Inca. The Inca is the god emperor of Peru. Like the Japanese and like the Egyptians, they believe that their ruler is a living god among men in human form. So the Inca is a descendant of Kontiki. However, the other descendants of Khan offend the gods, and they start rebelling. And so the gods dry them out with drought, and the people eventually deteriorate and become monkeys. And then the new god, Pakahakamache, comes along, and he creates a new race of people. So the Inca is the descendant of Khan, the descendant of the sun, and the people of the Inca Empire are all descendants of the people made by Pakahakamache. Okay. One more. The Norse. I'm skipping the Shona one. We'll do that next time. These are the Vikings. Come on. Yeah, you got it.
Okay, and
Okay, I need one other.
had
Who
an
else?
observation about the Incan thing.
I will do it.
Yeah?
It's just a little bit funny that they associate it with monkeys, that they associate humans with monkeys, just like the atheist creation myth.
Yeah, indeed. Will you read the other one, please? Okay. Well, the evolution.
Oh, yes.
And I actually am going to describe it that way. Okay, so you're going to do every other paragraph. You're going to start, Hunter.
Okay.
And then you're going to do the second
Do
one
you
and the
read the
fourth
note?
one. And no, don't worry about the note. And it continues. No, it doesn't continue on to the next page.
Okay.
Okay, go.
Long ago there was no heaven above nor earth beneath, only a vast bottomless deep shrouded in an atmosphere of mist. Somewhere in the middle of the abyss was a fountain from which 12 rivers flowed out like spokes of a wheel. As the rivers traveled far from their source, they froze.
South of the world of the mist, there was a world of light. Once a warm breeze blew out from the south and began to melt the ice. The contact of warm air and the cold created clouds. These clouds congealed to form frost giant. Ymir and his cow
I don't even know how to say
Aud Umbla.
Yeah, okay, cool. That thing.
Say it.
Aud Umbla.
Good.
Did I say that right? Okay.
Yes, you did.
Whose milk nourished the giant. As the ice melted, salt was exposed, which Ad Umbla licked, and she licked, and she exposed a man buried in the ice. On the first day, his hair was exposed. On the second day, one could see his whole head and shoulders. By the third day, his whole body was free of the ice. This was the first god, the father of Odin, Vili, and Ve.
These three young gods slew
Ymir.
and his salty blood flowed out to make the seas. You will remember that Ymir had been nursed by the cow who had licked salt out of the ice. The bones of Ymir formed the mountains, and his flesh formed the earth. From his hair sprang up all manner of plants. Among these were Asgate, the ash tree, and Imbla, the elm. From the ash tree, Odin fashioned a man, and from the elm a woman. From Odin himself, the humans received life and a soul. Vili gave them reason and motion, while Ve gave them speech and motion.
Odin organized the world, separating the darkness from light, creating night and day, and Odin fashioned Midgard, or Middle Earth, for mankind to dwell in. He also fashioned Asgard, home of the gods. The universe is supported by Yggdrasil, a mighty ash tree. One of her roots touches Asgard, another Midgard, and a third lies underground, where the souls of the dead dwell under the eye of Odin's sister Hel. Ymir the giant was not completely killed. Part of his body is still alive and sleeps at the great ash tree. Okay, how do you say it then?
Yggdrasil.
Yggdrasil. When his body stirs, the earth quakes.
Thank you both. And good job with really difficult to pronounce names. Okay. Fact 1. Cows like salt licks.
Yeah.
I learned this when I worked on a dairy farm. Cows like salt licks.
They like to lick salt.
Mm-hmm.
Because they sweat a lot.
As
I've
do I.
licked the salt before. It's actually not bad.
No, it's not.
It's quite delectable.
It's like, have you tried the dog food that you give your dog? I'm talking when you were a little kid.
No.
Yeah, except it's like a block.
Yeah.
We
have
Okay.
for our horses. It tastes pretty good.
Item 2. Yggdrasil, the great tree, connects the land of the gods, Asgard, with the land of men, Midgard, or Middle Earth. Tolkien didn't invent that, he adapted it. And the land of the dead. Ymir is like Tiamat in the Babylonian myth. His corpse makes the world. His ribs make the mountains, and so forth. So, according to both the Babylonians and the Norse, we live basically on a giant god corpse. And that's fine. That's the way it's supposed to be. Now, the Vikings don't have a happy end to their myths. If you're a human hero, just drop the pass on my desk. If you're a human hero, you get to die in battle and go to Asgard and live in the beer hall of the gods, Valhalla.
Yeah.
And drink with the gods and tell stories and fight every day and die and wake up and party. At the end, Surtur, king of the fire giants, will attack Asgard and will bring Ragnarok, the final battle that destroys the world. Everything ends in chaos. Bye!
Well.